I'm Shaw Osha. Welcome to the Art Lecture Series Spring Quarter. We have, yay! It's so great to have all of you here. It's really impressive. We have a full lineup this spring, more than our usual number. This week we have Ju-Pong Lin. Week 3 we have Sister Spit. Week 4 we have Linda Weintraub. Week 5 we have Alejandro de Acosta. Week 6 we have Kim Miller. Week 8 we have Stephen Hendricks. Week 9 we have Amjad Fowler, and we're also adding, I know it's just a great lineup, and we're adding yet another person week 10, so stay tuned for that. I want to remind you to look up the artists that are going to be coming prior to the lecture on our blogs.evergreen.edu/artist lecture series so that you can get acquainted with who's coming and then be more informed when you come in. And I want to remind us not to get up and leave for multiple bathroom breaks or leave en masse between the end of the talk and the beginning of the Q&A session, because that's a really important time for this to be a really invigorated, exciting structure, is the back and forth discourse and a conversation with the people presenting and among ourselves. So it's a really important part of it. So please realize this goes from 11:30 to 1. So today we have Ju-Pong Lin. She is an interdisciplinary artist, and she makes socially engaged videos, participatory installations, and performances. And she has been a faculty member at Evergreen and worked with some of the faculty that are here and one faculty when he was a student. She's currently the program director of the MFA in Interdisciplinary Arts at Goddard College. Her work evokes critical questions about why we live the way we do, why we choose to live the way we do, and where we live, and how we can live together in mutual flourishing. She is currently working on 2 projects that I think we will be witness to today in 2 forms. One is called Wicked Questions, which is a 3-part project of participatory films that ask and answer questions from people all over the world responding to questions about climate change. And the other is a sort of collaborative project with Bo Beausoleil called the Al Mutanabi Streets Starts Here. And we will be Skyping or something?
We won't be Skyping with Bo, we'll be Skyping with Teresa Konechny.
Okay, so we'll be Skyping with someone on this project, right?
On the other project.
On the other, okay,
Yeah.
okay. So, so she received her MFA in Intermedia Art from University of Iowa and shown work at the Walker Museum of Art and New York's Mix Festival. So, welcome.
Thank you. Wow. What a wonderful group. Full house. And I'd like to create a little bit more of an intimate atmosphere. A lot of my work happens in a more intimate space and is about relationships on a more intimate level. So I'd like to ask you all to rub your hands together, build up some nice heat, good energy, drawing in that good energy from the sky and from the earth. And now put your hands to your heart. Bring that energy to your heart. Thank you. Let's begin with gratitude. I give thanks to my ancestors, to my parents, my sisters, and all my relations from the island now known as Taiwan, Daibak, my homeland, my imagined community. Guaxi Daiwandang, I give thanks for the wild onion, the bioregion of my childhood. Thanks to the people who lived with the land and loved the soil that nourished her, the grasses that fed the ungulates that decomposed the soil that keeps the trees rooted. Let's begin with gratitude. Give thanks to the indigenous people displaced by our settlement here and there and across the oceans. And thanks so much to the Evergreen State College, to Therese Saliba and Shah Osha for inviting me here today. So I'm a many-legged artist who loves playing with the strands of frayed edges and unexpected twists in the storyline. And some of this is going to be read because I want to give us lots of good time at the end to work with wicked questions. And I have my collaborator and friend, Teresa Konieczny, online, waiting behind the screen. So I want to try to keep to my time limit. So, twists in the storyline. I've learned how important it is to introduce oneself with care, to locate myself wherever I travel. So part one of this talk is kind of an extended introduction of Wicked Questions, a global conversation on climate and change. And it is an extended introduction helping me to place myself here and locate myself in relationship to the places I've traveled. So I know you're supposed to just have one big idea for presentations, but I have four. The four big ideas that I am going to be working around, that I'm going to be dancing around today, are the idea of powerful or strategic questions. Wicked Questions is all about asking questions that drive our curiosity and open up spaces for dialogue. Systems and networks, I'm going to be talking a little bit about systems thinking. And related to that, looking for leverage points for change. This is coming from the work of Donella Meadows, whose book, Thinking in Systems, a Primer, is a really wonderful introduction to systems thinking. And the Wicked Questions art process is a way of finding leverage points, of listening to the wisdom of systems. And finally, the idea of commoning, or reclaiming the commons. So, for me, oops. So this is a diagram of my attempt to reinterpret the panarchy. Panarchy is an idea it's a modeling that comes from ecology, and it's a way of understanding how complex systems work. This one was developed by Berkey's, Colding, and Folke. And so as you can see on the left-hand side, as potential increases, and on the lower axis, connectivity travels from weak to strong. So as a system grows and exploits its potential, it becomes greater, and the connectivity increases. Everything in the system becomes more and more connected until a certain point where there's the energy flow is, more in than out. So this whole system needs to go into a period of conservation. And then as the system moves further towards conservation and continues to grow, it'll reach a state of collapse or release, and then it comes back around. The release allows for the system to reorganize. So that's kind of the panarchy that I'd like to have you keep in mind as I continue to talk about systems. So I was born in Taiwan. This is the wrong page. I'm an immigrant and have migrated and traveled a lot. I was born in Taiwan, and my family migrated to Canada before I turned 3, moved 6 times by the time I was 8, and then we landed in the Wild Onion bioregion, more commonly known as metropolitan Chicago. My cultural heritage is Chinese and Taiwanese. My family originally came from the Fujian province and settled in Taiwan 7 generations ago. So the question, who are my people, is the question that has haunted me most of my life. Who are my people has everything to do with where we are and where we have been. I stand at the edge where earth touches ocean, where the two overlap, a gentle coming together, at other times and places, a violent clash. Those were the words of Gloria Anzaldúa. With these words in Borderlands' La Frontera, Anzaldúa warns the reader that they will be responsible, you will be responsible, for stitching together the collage, the mixtape, the crazy quilt of her autobiography. As an artist who works with and across many kinds of communities, I take great care with introductions and invitations. Locating myself invites others to locate yourselves, opens up a space where audience can become a verb. Who am I in relationship to my beloved others? I'm an immigrant, a mother, a seventh generation descendant of Taiwanese, eldest daughter of farmer, becomes scientist, a daughter of a reluctant mother and career woman, granddaughter of an independent businesswoman, artist, writer, educator. So those last few identities were hard-won, wrought from decades of assimilation in colonialist schooling. So that's a little bit about my introduction. I'd like to ask you to introduce yourselves. So if you could take a minute and think about how many times your family relocated or migrated by the time you were 10 years old. And then just hold up fingers. How many times? Okay. How many times by the time you were 20 did you relocate? Some of you might have to do, Okay. So just take 15 seconds or so, turn to a neighbor and introduce yourself, say your name and your cultural heritage. So how many of you it's hard to be interactive with 200 people in a room, but how many of you speak a language other than English? Raise your hands. That's pretty good. That looked like about a third or more of the room. For me, language it brings up a lot of emotion. Because of the schooling, assimilationist policies in the USA and colonial schooling, I nearly lost my mother tongue. My parents also grew up under Japanese occupation, and they were forced to speak Japanese in grade school. And so my father is still fluent in Japanese. Many of my relatives in Taiwan, they live in Taiwan, but they grew up during the time when Mandarin was the primary language. So language loss is a big, that's another question that haunts me, is how to reclaim my mother tongue. Taiwanese is a language peppered with expletives and articles that are untranslatable into English. Taiwan wei, gua tian di, di gong e wei tian gua. The word for neighbor is a composite of home and nearby, and the words love and hurt sound the same. So it's in part of this language loss that I was drawn to learn about loss of biocultural diversity and indigenous language claim projects, and that their role in global systems change. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Oh, I didn't say anything about the Adrian rich quote. I like this very much. The problem was that we did not know whom we meant when we said we. So she was talking about the early feminist movement and the ways that women and gender were essentialized, and cultural diversity and racism were kind of obscured by this attention to gender as the primary force of oppression. She says, it was in the writings, but also in the actions and speeches and sermons of Black United States citizens that I began to experience the meaning of my whiteness as a point of location for which I needed to take responsibility. It was in reading poems by contemporary Cuban women that I began to experience the meaning of North America as a location, which had also shaped my ways of seeing and my ideas of who and what was important, a location for which I was also responsible. So in this quest to take responsibility for my location, I began to, when I was teaching here at Evergreen and living in Olympia, I began to research the history of this location. And I found that there was once a Chinatown in Olympia, and that this was the dwelling place of all the cheap labor. Chinese people were brought here as cheap labor and tradable bodies, brought here to build not only the transcontinental railroad, but also the roads and buildings. Many of my projects revolve around re-narrating or counter-narrating the story of my life of migration, immigration, displacement, and alienation from homeland. So it's that question again, who are my people, is the question that I've spent most of my life pursuing, and it has opened up many other questions. I find that by asking this question, I create a space for others' stories and an invitation to collective story making and story listening. So in this piece, Laundry Stories, this was right downtown in Olympia. There used to be 3 banks on that corner. I don't know if there still are. But at one time, there were 3 Chinese laundries on that corner. And I put the history of that Chinese immigration on silk-screened on these shirts that I hung up on a laundry line outside on that corner. And it includes the story of the expulsion of the Chinese. So at a certain point, there were a lot of Chinese laborers, and the white people, dominant white population, felt that the Chinese were taking their jobs away. So there was this whole period of Chinese expulsions all up and down the Pacific Northwest coast and down into California. Tacoma actually is now well known for the Tacoma method, which was where they went into the Chinese people's homes and told them they had to get out. They had like an hour to pack up their bags, and they were escorted to the trains and driven out of town. And then many of the buildings were burned. So that history was on these shirts. And I integrated those stories with the stories of my own family's complex relationship to Chinese history, being someone from Taiwan. After I told my stories, I invited others to tell their stories about laundry. People told stories about how the washing machine changed their grandmother's lives, the stigma of doing other people's wash, how segregation lingered in the laundromats. So in this process of listening to stories and telling stories, people, spectators, became spect-actors, as Augusto Boal would say. Then, when I moved to Rhode Island, I told stories of my family's migratory troubles in Rhode Island. When I was about to purchase a home, I discovered that there was a restrictive covenant on the house. It was in the signing of the papers at the lawyer's office, when the lawyer said to me, we have to do a title search on your property before you make the purchase. And in doing the title search, she found this restrictive covenant that said, no persons of Chinese descent may buy this house. And this was in 2002. She said that the covenant was illegal, but no one had bothered to take this off the books. The house was built in 1950, just so you get a sense of the time frame. So that got me really interested in the stories of that neighborhood. And I started going door to door, asking people what were the stories of the neighborhood. I got a lot of people shutting the door in my face, but I also got some people telling me about how this neighborhood, they grew up in this neighborhood, they raised their families in this neighborhood, and then the Rhode Island College came into the backyard where there was a beautiful pond, and the college filled in the pond and built the college. And not only that, the president of the college came and visited one of the houses that I went to, and apparently they were interested in that house as a house that they could live in. And so, uninvited, the wife of the president asked to look through the kitchen cabinets and the closets, the bedroom closets. So, fascinating stories that I heard. I heard lots of stories of gentrification and communities displaced that highlighted the effect of environmental impacts of migration, globalization, and colonization. Telling and listening to these stories was healing for me, and healing for the small communities that experienced them. Stories make community. Community is what we make when we tell stories, when we sing songs together, when we make art together. And yet, in doing this work, I realized that I wanted to work at a larger scale, that I felt I was having an impact on these small communities, but the impact was created in the moment of performance, and I didn't have a good way of linking the stories to a larger movement, to incite a larger kind of intervention. So on this journey in pursuit of the question of who are my people, I began to understand that every place I have ever lived has been occupied land, colonized land. Taiwan was colonized for over 400 years by the Dutch, Portuguese, and the Japanese. And of course, every place in the United States is a settler colony. Exploitation of people and land is part of the same pattern of domination that Gregory Bateson might call an ecology of bad ideas. And ecofeminist Val Plumwood talks about in terms of the human nature dualism on which Western science is constructed. Val Plumwood writes, "Human nature dualism, as I argued in Feminism and the Mastery of Nature, is a system of ideas that takes a radically separated reason to be the essential characteristic of humans and situates human life outside and above in an inferiorized and manipulable nature." So in other words, the essence of humanity, according to this Western epistemology, is rationality, that humans are fundamentally rational. And she's arguing, no, that's actually just one aspect of what humans are. Rationalism and human nature dualism, rationalism and the human nature dualism are linked through the narrative which maps the supremacy of reason onto human supremacy via the identification of humanity with active mind and reason, and of non-humans with passive, tradable bodies. So humans, that she's talking about the domination of humans over nature, of seeing the earth merely as a substrate, and animals as lower on the pecking order than humans. Okay, so I see that I'm going to have to race through some of these slides so that we can get to the wicked question stuff. These next couple of slides have to do with my study of Taiwanese film. This one is a feature film about the indigenous people in Taiwan who resisted Japanese occupation. And this next one is a documentary called Voices of Orchid Island by the director Hu Tai Lee. This film is about the Yami people living on Orchid Island, which is off the southern coast of Taiwan. And the film reveals how tourism has commodified the Yami culture, as it has many places around the world. And it creates a paternalistic relationship between the Taiwanese on the mainland of Taiwan and the indigenous people. Yet at the same time, the tourist industry also is driving preservation of the culture. So that's another wicked question is, how can we reclaim tourism so that it actually is creating, restoring and preserving cultural heritage and restoring the environment. The end of this film is about the dumping of nuclear waste, which Taiwan was shipping all this nuclear waste to this island. This is another very common pattern that you see around the world is the dumping of waste on indigenous lands. Okay. So I want to just move into the next section of this presentation with a little bit about systems thinking, which I've been talking about. So Donella Meadows, in this book, Thinking in Systems, a primer, she defines systems as an interconnected set of elements that is coherently organized in a way that achieves something. So the important aspects of that there are different elements and they're interconnected. So it's important to look at the interconnections and how they're interconnected. It's not just like a pile of sand, which there's no connective relationship between the grains of sand. And the system has some function or purpose. And that'll be important later as we talk about how do you make change in a system. One really important way, one powerful strategy is to change the purpose of the system. So one example she gives is, if you think about a university as a system, if you believe the purpose of the system of the university is to create knowledge, then the system behaves in one way. But if you shift that and you have people in leadership who believe that the university's function is to make profit or to win football games, then that causes the system to shift in maybe detrimental ways. So now let me say a little bit about the Al-Mutanabi Street project. As you just heard, I'm the director of the MFA in Interdisciplinary Arts, and I've been teaching in that program for about 10 years. And the MFA in Interdisciplinary Arts is a very dynamic learning community. And it's also a low residency college, so we only meet once a semester for a very intensive 8-day period. And it was during that time that we brought Bobo Soleil, and during one of those residencies that we brought Bobo Soleil, and the project Al-Mutanabi Street starts here. I actually learned about this through one of our students, who's now a graduate, who was involved with this project. And I heard about it at first as a book arts project. But the story that I learned when Bo came was that this is a project that was kind of initiated when Bo Soleil heard about the 2007 bombing of the Al-Mutanabi Street. This is a street in Baghdad, which is a very vibrant cultural hub. It's a street lined with booksellers and cafes, and all the intellectuals in town would come to this one street and debate politics and talk about culture and write and make things. And so when this street was bombed, Bo really saw this as an attack on cultural vitality, an attack on the culture. So the project that he initiated was to invite bookmakers and poets and artists and authors from all over the world to create something in response, to reclaim cultural vitality. And the first call was for broadsides and then for book arts. So this is now, it's kind of a traveling exhibit, but it's many places. There's no really central location. There's not like the whole book collection in one place, but it shows up wherever it's invited. So if you invite him, he'll come, and you can see an exhibit of the books, and he'll do a reading, and he'll show all kinds of amazing films about Al-Mutanabbi Street, as well as the violence in Iraq and how people are resisting it. Okay, I am really out of time, so I'll just show a couple of images from the exhibit that came to Goddard. This one's called The Diameter of the Bomb, and the way it was exhibited, the pieces outside, they fold in, so it can look like a circle, or then the pieces, the radiating pieces, can be folded out. And this is just a kind of collage of some of the works. And there's a collection of essays and poetry that Bo put together. He's one of the editors, and it's called Al-Mutanabbi Street Starts Here. It's a wonderful book. So again, I'm going to sort of race through these ideas. So some of my recent work is really making an attempt to map systems thinking as it's been developed by Donella Meadows and Western thinkers and scientists to kind of map that, or figure out how I could understand systems thinking from an Asian perspective. So I'm trying to merge yin-yang thinking. Yin-yang is a system of it's a system of knowledge. It's a method of organizing experience. It's really, it was a way of guiding people's lives. It still is a way of guiding how you live your life. And some of the principles of yin-yang include interdependency. So you can hear there, a connection with the systems thinking about how different elements in a system are connected together. So in yin-yang, different elements are interdependent, they're dynamic. There is opposition in the system, but it's dynamic and it's relative. So in other words, the dualism that Val Plumwood was talking about, right, wrong, male, female, all of these dualisms, human nature, these dualisms that dominate Western thinking, they're not static categories. In yin-yang, these are fluid. So if anyone's ever done Tai Chi or learned about Asian philosophy, you'll recognize this, that yin and yang, female, male, they are in opposition, but there's also the belief that each of us has female and male within us. Those are just forces. They're opposing forces, but they're relative and they change all the time. And that's what the intertransformational principle is speaking to, is that ability of one thing to transform into another, for one system to transform into something else. So I just find those ideas really motivating and inspiring when I think about how to change a system that seems so intransigent, a system such as capitalism or imperialism, or the oppressive forces in the society we live in. I think I already did that. I'm just going to skip that. So I'm trying to look at art and sustainability through this lens of a yin-yang way of understanding systems thinking. And this is it's a piece. This is from a blog that it was about a art and sustainability festival in Singapore, and it's a beautiful piece. It's made all of light bulbs, and those thin threads you see hanging down are like pull strings, and I think it's called Cloud. And it's really beautiful, but I had to ask, how does this kind of work contribute to changing the system? How does it help? How does it contribute to changing the system that's bringing about climate change? Okay, I'm just going to skip these next few slides, and yay, I'm not too late. So now we get to wicked questions. And I'm going to, now you're going to see me dance a little bit as I try to bring my collaborator on screen. Are you there? Yay.
Yeah.
Okay, so wicked questions, a global conversation on climate and change is a project that Teresa Konieczny, this is Teresa Konieczny, and I and 3 other main artists have been working on for a while. We're the core team, and we've been developing this for a year, is that right, Teresa?
Yeah.
Probably a year.
Over a year.
Over a year, okay. Collaboration is a slow process, but a very fruitful one. So the idea of the project, what I'd like to do is just give a very brief summary now, and then we have some exercises that we'd like you to participate in so that you can understand this project through experiencing it rather than having me tell you all about it. So for now, I'll just say our intention is that this is a artist-led project, global project, to bring about an international conversation. And there's an element of it that's participatory video. There's an element of it that has to do with finding your wicked questions. And there's an element of it that will be a toolkit for bringing this project to your communities and linking. There's a website that will link the many creative outcomes of the project in various communities. So Teresa is, we have been working together since graduate school, so it's been a long time. She's a filmmaker and a beautiful filmmaker and interdisciplinary artist, and also a skilled facilitator of complex conversations. So I'd like to bring her on. Take it away, Teresa.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, even though I can't see you. I have to look at myself. Oh, that's much better. I think it's sort of inhumane to actually make me look at myself projected. So I just wanted to give you a little background of how this project happened. And it's an emotional story for me, so I'm sure I'll get choked up as I am right now. So I was making films about how people are reconnecting to land. That was my work around climate change. I grew up on a farm in South Dakota, and I have a very deep connection to the land, to the prairie landscape. And I spent 17 years making a film about women and land in that landscape and the prairie, and sort of how people take the prairie for granted and don't understand it. So through that 17 years, I really got to a place of healing with the land and coming back to it not as a farmer, a commodity farmer, which is what our relationship was to the land and the animals that we were raising, but to understanding that it's a sacred relationship and it's a sacred place. And so in this conversation that Ju-Pong and I were having was about 4 months after my brother died. And when he was young, he had Hodgkin's lymphoma, and at the time, the only kind of cure, the new cure that they were implementing for this very harsh disease was a full body radiation, very intense radiation. And so he lived for another 30 years, but over the 30 years he was very ill, and we were watching him as almost every organ in his body was just slowly dying from the radiation. And the hard part about it, besides him dying, was that he was in denial of dying. And so in this conversation with Ju-Pong, I just sort of blurted out, like, maybe we're in hospice and we refuse to believe it. And because I saw how when he was in denial as he was dying, he didn't take care of business, and he sort of, that denial kept us as a family from having deep conversations and sort of healing old wounds and having the kinds of conversations that you can have when somebody recognizes that they're not going to be around very much longer. And so that's how Wicked Questions was born. In one like sort of catalytic conversation where Wicked Questions is a term that we use in the facilitation world as the questions that are the catalyst for deep conversation, and what can bring about people looking at themselves and their communities, or whatever, and peeling back those layers. So that's where the title came from, and that's where the project came from. And I'm really, really excited for you to participate in this, even though we're not launched yet. We're almost. But we've been gathering questions now for almost a year, and the miraculous thing about it is that we have almost 70 questions, and not one of them is the same. And I think that just points to how much people struggle with this topic and struggle with the emotionality of it and the the ability to make sense of it for themselves. And so I'm going to hand it back to you, Ju-Pong,
Okay.
to introduce the...
Yes. Okay, I think I have to turn it like this in order for me to be in front of the microphone, so sorry,
That's
Teresa.
fine. You
You're
can
going
do
to be
that.
looking at my armpit. Let's see, because I got to go back to the...
Did you want to show the website?
Yes, I'm trying to do that.
I can do a screen share. Let me just do a screen share.
Okay, great, thank you. That's the
You got it?
solution.
Is it on there?
Yes,
Okay.
let me just move that out of the way. So this is the website that is not yet launched but about to be launched. This is tricky. Okay. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I can take this off. Okay. So up at the top, the summary. WQ is an artist-led intervention that invites all people to respond deeply, personally, and collectively to climate change through a global movement of transforming isolation and fear into creative and collaborative action. So the three parts of the project are designed to kind of move from very personal work to collective work, to collective action and collaborative action. I think that's all I need to say, don't you think, Teresa?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I'll introduce, what we want you to do right now is to think about how is climate change affecting you, your community, or what you're observing. And I'm just going to give you a little story to sort of start your creative juices flowing. So one of my stories around climate change is that I have chronic Lyme disease. And there's a good, and I'm in the Midwest, I'm in Minneapolis, and there's a lot of that here, and it's been really sort of exploding with people having Lyme disease. And they think of it as a disease that is attached to climate change because of the weather changing, and there's a lot more deer and habitats being lost and things like that. So my story is that I used to be a vegetarian, and I would prefer to be a vegetarian, but because of the Lyme disease, that it's pretty much destroyed my digestive system. So meat is one of the only things that I can eat that my body can tolerate at this point. So the complexity for me of climate change and my health, and then how it goes back to, raising cattle or pigs or whatever on a landscape, and the water usage and the fuel usage of feeding those animals, all of that stuff that I'm very familiar with because I grew up on a beef and pig farm. So that's my story around climate change. And I just invite you to take a little bit of time and think about either how you're experiencing it or things that are happening in your community, whatever community you define, or things that you're seeing in nature. And just think about it, and we're gonna do a little mapping of this.
So originally I was thinking I would do this on the blackboard, but it's behind the screen. So my thought is if you could write on a piece of paper that we could put up here on the floor, we can kind of create a map down here. So just take a minute or two to write. And when you're done with your little piece, you can bring it down or pass it down, and I'll read them off. The question again? So the question is, how is climate change affecting your community?
Or you.
Or you? What are you experiencing? Yes. Another question?
Okay, so are you asking what individuals are experiencing on a personal basis, or are you asking what we notice around us?
So the question was, are we asking what individuals are experiencing, or what are we noticing around us? I think it's either. I guess for me the question of how it's affecting my community is more compelling, but if you're noticing things, that's great. What are you noticing that's going on that makes you think about climate change? Okay, so I'm going to start reading off some of these and placing them on the ground. Guilt about purchasing items from the seemingly endless abundancy in grocery stores. The drought in California is so bad I decided to stop buying almonds. Almonds and alfalfa, in parentheses beef, take up 1/5 of California's water. So let's see. Weather and temperature a lot warmer than usual in winter. The fruit I love will someday soon be not a damn thing. climate change, first foods: nettle, camas, wild onion, wild carrots. The frog, something of the close sacred season. I can't read that one. I miss nature. In my ancestral Hopi village, our water source is drying up and becomes contaminated to a degree we can't drink it anymore. I think about climate change every day because I need to keep it constantly on my mind to avoid having panic attacks. I am trying to get my whole family to move from my hometown in California. You know what? I'm going to ask if there's anyone who would like to read with me, and we can read in place, so we can read some more of these. Feel free to come up.
My grandfather spent a good deal of time in Chile, and while there, he befriended two resort owners. So every few summers, my family takes a trip down there to go skiing. Every year, there's less snow in the mountains, and the ski season is shorter. If this keeps up, they will have to close.
Winter in Olympia feels like spring. Now it is so dry in California, even driving through Oregon, I've seen the effects of a warmer climate. Climate change has made me come to terms with the sluggish form of insectations, like nation states and governing bodies. Through analyzing climate change, I have come to the understanding that the project of civilization must be attacked in a way as to resist being incorporated into another node of capital.
Climate change has impacted the types of conversations that I can have with my family and friends. Because of climate change, people have permission to question everything.
Feral cats everywhere, dying of illness and killing 3 billion birds, cute animals over birds, bees, etc.
SodaStream in Israel claims that it's environmentally friendly, but their factory is actually on an illegal settlement on a colonized land.
Climate change affects me because being a part of this society, I am a contributor. I experience grief because I want to support the life of the earth rather than hurt it.
The creek I swam in as a child no longer has water in it in the summer.
I recycle.
There are no more frogs singing in my grandma's pond.
I worry about tuna and fishing in the ocean. I worry about diminished resources.
Rapid decline of the orca whale population in the Puget Sound.
The trees that were cut for all these pieces of paper.
Panic mentality, eliminating space for contemplative work, encouraging instrumentalized approach to education.
That's probably enough.
I think we'll just do a couple more. It is impossible to escape the news and stories about climate change. With spring coming earlier every year, there may soon be a time when pollinators are no longer able to reach flowers before they are gone. When the seasons are no longer able to be predicted, it's going to be impossible to grow food.
Weird weather has affected the growth of grapes in my parents' winery. Warmer weather as driving out the hillsides creating fire, drying out hillsides creating fire hazard and forcing wildlife in towards the populated portions of town.
Well, we could go on, but these are amazing. We will take these and create a map, and they'll be incorporated into the project. Thank you so much. So we'd like to do one more activity with you, which is the finding your wicked questions process. And Teresa, maybe it would be easier if you shared this. Can you do that? Do a screen share rather than have me go back to the slide of the process for finding your wicked question.
Oh, do you want to show the video now?
Oh, yes, sorry. Okay, so
Which I could also do, probably.
I can do it.
Okay.
If I remember which. Okay, this was it. Wait, we got to start at the beginning because, okay.
How can we know this and do nothing?
How do we overcome our differences to improve our mutual chances of survival?
Do we hate our children enough not to care about their future?
Yeah.
Why don't you realise how much power you have?
Now that it's here, what? Now that it's here, what?
How is my privilege keeping me asleep?
How do we shrink our economies without collapsing it and hurting people?
Why are we afraid to change things, and why are we afraid to be unsettled?
If we are to effect meaningful outer change, that it will coincide, come along with a meaningful cultural, spiritual, inner transformation.
We need to stop arguing about things that aren't important and focus on climate change. Why are we getting involved in wars all around the world when mass extinction is right on our doorstep?
I think what we're unleashing as a consequence of our lifestyle can't be forgiven, and I think it might be narcissistic to hope for forgiveness.
It's right here in our homes. So what are we going to do? We have to do something different.
We need to radically change our lifestyles pretty damn quick. Because if we don't, we will not be able to impact any change on this planet whatsoever. And that means you, me, everyone, every day with everything that we do. Every stuff that we buy, every move that we make, all the food that we eat, everything we're surrounded by. And it's the greatest journey we're all embarked on. So let's do it now.
So now we'd like to give you a chance to try out this finding your wicked questions process. Let me just switch screens here and get Teresa back on. Okay. So in the video, what you saw was the result of people working with Teresa and myself for the most part. It was the two of us that have done this process with different communities. And it's really a journey inward to find what you're most passionate about and your wicked questions around how to change these systems. So this is the handout that I actually have copies of if people would like to take some, that outlines the 12-step process. So we start with listening. Listening to the wisdom of the system, right? It's not a conversation. Conversations are important, but in this process, this is really, it starts with a listening process. You're recording and reflecting back. So one person will be doing the recording and listening, and the other person will be probing inwards and trying to find their wicked question. So as a listener, you're helping to be a scribe and to reflect back what the other person is saying. Begin. Always begin where the person is at. Ask them if they have a question they're working with. Some people are coming into this with a question, which I think you might have been able to hear in the comments we collected. If not, ask them something like, what are you passionate about? When you think about climate change, what do you feel? And go ahead and ask that question. You know, like when you say it out loud, it has a, you're conveying something, you're communicating with the other person. So, you know, it's important to try it out. Notes, take notes to get their language to be able to reflect back. You want their words, language, and structure to be up front. So every person has a different way of speaking, a different kind of language. So you really want to be listening for their words and not trying to translate it into how you might say something. Questions. So if you're the scribe, you need to ask permission. If you can start formulating a question, if you hear that the other person is starting to form something, you know, ask their permission. Can I help you with that? You can take their words and consolidate them into a question, or sometimes you might have to change a little bit of the words to formulate it into a question. Once you've formulated the question, always ask, does this sound authentic to you? What would you change? What about this resonates with you? Check that the questioner's voice has not been overshadowed or misinterpreted. Okay, the person, if you're the one finding the question.
We can stop there.
Pardon me?
I think we can stop there, yeah.
Okay, that's good enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of time. And I think, unfortunately, I think we're only going to be able to do one person in the pairing.
Right, okay. So what we'd like you to do is pair up and one person be the listener, the other person be the question finder, and work for, how much time do we have, Teresa?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? So spend 10 minutes doing this process, and then we'll ask volunteers to come up and speak their question to us. Okay? Any questions? So maybe take another 30 seconds or so. Are some people coming to your question? So when I thought there were going to be maybe 30 or 40 people here, I was imagining that some of you might come up to the front or maybe all of you might come up to the front and embody your question and speak it. But there are a lot of you in the room, and some of you are very up high, so I think maybe we should alter that. And if it's easy for you to come up front, you can do that. Otherwise, you can just stand where you are. So what we'd like you to do now is, those of you who have found your wicked question, really feel it in your body. Say the question in your head and feel where it lands in your body. And then speak it to us. And we'll just do this, kind of whoever feels comfortable to come up here and do it, or if you want to stand up, we'll just, the rest of us will make it quiet. Let's keep our voices down and listen. And when you're ready, stand up and embody your question and speak it. And if you come down here, you can use the mic.
We'd love you to come down front and use the mic.
Hi, my name is Naima, and what Therese and I talked about was how to sort of, for me to push through the challenge that I sometimes have of conversations about climate change and environmental disaster sort of being decoupled from cultural and colonial disaster, and the ways that that seems totally ahistorical and bizarre. And so for me, it becomes an issue of how do we recenter the conversation about climate change around the people who have actually already survived apocalypse after apocalypse after apocalypse, right? It's sort of like the global north is catching up to what some of us have been living through for a long time. So thank you. So the question is, how do we recenter conversations about climate change to look for our answers from people who have already lived through disaster after disaster, and through colonialism, slavery, imperialism, et cetera? How do we make sure that we don't decouple those issues, that environmental restoration and colonial restoration have to be hand in hand?
Let's have about 5 people come up front and just speak your question. I mean, I think the power of embodying your question and speaking it for other people to hear is that you'll hear the diversity.
Remember the film. So each of those images, when someone came up to speak their question, they were making the film, right? That's an act of creation. They were making a self-portrait that became part of the film. So that's what we're asking you to do, to come up, and when we say embody the question, you are contributing to making this self-portrait. Okay, come on up and let's have you. How about some women?
I'm a woman inside.
Come on up.
How can I change that which I do not take responsibility for?
If we save the salmon to save the sea lions, can we save the ocean to save ourselves?
What are we, as a society, so afraid to lose that we aren't really trying to change things?
How does your cultural heritage inform to you the things about climate change that are the most bothersome?
when will we grieve collectively in public?
Any last ones? Well, we just have a few minutes left, Teresa, and I'm thinking I'd like to, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. One more.
Thanks. My question is, like, how the colonized in the Gaza Strip have a free access to the participation of the ecosystem, while the only access that they have is to dump their sewage water to the sea.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, to those who came up. And thank you all for your participation. With just a few minutes left, I had a poem that I wanted to end on, and then maybe we just have a few minutes for questions. Is that okay, Teresa? And we have a question we'd like to leave you with. Maybe we should do the question first. So the question we'd like you to take home or to classes, to your work ahead, is how are you or your community contributing to climate change? How is your community contributing to climate change? So that's the wicked question we'd like to leave you with.
Q&A.
And I'm going to turn you off for a minute. Are you still there, Teresa?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wrote this poem in response to my wicked question, which has to do with technology and how we can reclaim the media in a way that honors the people that honors everybody. You know, I mean, the media is an industry that actually has horrific environmental impacts, and we don't think about it, we don't know about it, many of us. We carry around our cell phones and our computers, and I'm doing it, you know. So that's my wicked question. So this quote of Rumi is what spurred this poem. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Okay, greeting the sun. So, hi Dad, hi Mom, shoot. I don't know where that's coming from. Okay, it stopped. That was, okay, oh, let's do it
So,
again.
hi Dad.
Stop. Okay. Greeting the sun, we touch the screens on our phones to locate our bodies. Check pockets for don't leave home without it devices. Eyes enthralled by machines that conjure faces, other places, others' homes. In the twittering 24/7 texting networked clouds of virtual connection, where do we hit pause? When do we ask, who may suffer for our pleasure? Who sweats black tears to craft our treasures? Whose lives are made beautiful by technological wonders? Out beyond the zeros and ones, there is a real field. Meet me there, and we will fill our pockets with acorns and rocks and stories, listen to night critters, and ache for the fragrance of wild ginger and onion flowers. So we have 3 minutes for any questions or comments. Question? Yeah, go ahead. Can you just speak loudly?
As students, how may we get involved in wicked questions?
Excellent question. He asked, as students, how may we be involved in Wicked Questions? So we are working really hard to launch this website soon. I'm afraid to give a date, but I'm making a trip out to Minneapolis to work with Teresa in May. So I do think it'll be pretty soon that we launch the website. You can invite us to come and work with your classes. We can come in on Skype. You know, we meet, the 5 artists are from all over the world. There's one in New Zealand. They're all over the country and New Zealand. We hope to be more all over the world. But we do our meetings all on Skype. So we're very accustomed to, you know, working that way. Yes, in the back?
The other, wait,
Oh,
can I
yes, go ahead.
The other way is that once it's launched on the Host a Wicked Conversation, there will be tools. The other thing that we really, really want people to do is to learn these tools, and they're easy. As you saw today, it only takes a few minutes to actually help somebody find their question. And we're gearing towards the Climate Summit in Paris in November and December. I'm compiling a list right now of climate legislators who are denying that climate change is happening, and sending not only your question but everybody you know, or questions from the website. The website's going to be like an open source website where questions from all over the world will be coming in, and we invite you to just take this and run with it. We want people to make films. We want people to take it and make spoken word pieces. We want people to create events that have music, original music around the questions. I saw a dance piece where I thought, God, it'd be great if somebody would dance the questions. And when I just did this in San Antonio, one of the participants said, these questions need to be sung. So what we're hoping is that this project no longer looks like our project in 6 months. It really looks like your project. So we invite students to get people together and have these conversations and bring it into your families, into your churches, or to your the groups of people that you are with that care about this stuff, or even that are just struggling with it. So my invitation to you is to just be really creative and just take it and run with it.
Hear, hear. And I'm back in this area twice a year because I do the residencies in Port Townsend twice a year. So, there's more opportunities to bring me back. There's one more question in the back. Is the video online is the question? The
Yes.
videos are on Vimeo, yes. Can they find them by searching Wicked Questions, or?
Look up 1,000 Wicked Questions.
1,000 Wicked Questions on Vimeo.
I think. We're going to actually change the title to 1 million Wicked Questions with the hopes of getting to 1 million.
Okay, I think we're over time and you're probably ready to go to lunch. Thank you very much.